we're live.
All right. Hello and welcome to the PFF Q&A Mailbag. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Not sure about you guys, but I don't think I can count how many best ball drafts I did this weekend. I'm getting extremely excited for the NFL season, extremely excited for fantasy. Obviously, the best fantasy content you can find is on PFF.com. But how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing well, Doug, and you're right. We already did a few fantasy drafts this past week. I have a couple more coming up here in the next few days, and that tells you that football season is here, and I cannot wait.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned best ball. I had a redraft yesterday. I have a redraft today, and I have one on Wednesday as well. And I think of all the great things you can access with the Kickoff 30 promo code, the custom, I don't know about you guys, but I'm in a couple very bizarre leagues with weird rules and weird scoring. You can just copy and paste the URL of your league into our site, and it gives you customized rankings based on your league's rules. I'll tell you right now, I think I've made money based on winning some of these leagues over the years. So you can't really get better than that.
Absolutely. Well, the downside of, I guess, talking about fantasy is some of the injuries that have happened in recent days, over the past week, since we did our last show on Monday. The two main ones that relate to fantasy are Ravens running back J.K. Dobbins out for the season with a knee injury, Jaguars rookie running back Travis Etienne out for the season with a foot injury. So these have massive repercussions with the NFL, obviously also with fantasy. Let's just start off, I guess, with Dobbins, since that's the most recent injury, that's relating to what we're talking about here. Really seems like it could be the Gus Edwards show there in Baltimore, unless they look outside the organization, try to get some veteran help. There are actually still some veteran running backs like Todd Gurley that are still out there that, who knows, a team might take a shot on. Doesn't seem like anything's coming imminently there, but always a possibility.
For sure, and this is just a brutal injury. I mean, it hurt to see it happen. I mean, Dobbins was poised to have a breakout sophomore year there in Baltimore. We saw what he did last year in his rookie year. We know how much the Ravens value that running game, and to see that happen to not just a really good running back, but a really good guy there in Baltimore, a guy that all his teammates love, it really hurt to see. And obviously out for the year with the ACL injury, and potentially more damage as well to his LCL as well. We'll probably get more information on that here later this week. But as for the Ravens, they have a couple of running backs there on the roster. You mentioned Gus Edwards, who was a restricted free agent this offseason, and they extended with a 2-year, $10 million deal. That tells you that they already really like him, and he has started for them in the past. In 2018, he started 6 games down the stretch. He averaged 90 yards per game there for Baltimore, had a couple of touchdowns as well. So he could be the guy that is start to year. But as you mentioned as well, there are plenty of veteran running backs who are available. Todd Gurley visited there in June. As of right now, it doesn't look like that's something that's going to happen, but it is something to watch here as the next few weeks go by.
Yeah, there's real world and fantasy implications. And, another 2020 second round running back in Cam Akers with the Los Angeles Rams go down. And, even though initially Sean McVay said they had no plans to make a big move, they end up making a splash and trading for Sonny Michel. I put this out last week, but I think I'd mentioned his name too much. But Royce Freeman in Denver, there are 3 legitimate running backs on that roster now. With new GM George Payton bringing in Mike Boone from the Vikings. They trade up and draft Javonte Williams and, of course, have Melvin Gordon. The Ravens ran the highest percentage of power runs in the NFL from 2019 to 20. Second was the Denver Broncos. So Royce Freeman is a fit on this roster, and I think this team is too reliant on their run game. I like Gus Edwards. They clearly like Gus Edwards a lot. They mentioned a new guy, Tyson Williams, who's been flashing in camp, but they can't afford to not have a couple guys on this depth chart because they just run the ball so darn much.
Yeah, Tyson Williams is an interesting name to mention. He's definitely been shining both in preseason and in camp. Doesn't sound like he's quite a roster lock, just as the Ravens kind of figure out what else they want to do at that running back position, but definitely a name to look for there because the Ravens do like having that running back by committee. So you know that Gus Edwards isn't going to be the only one carrying the ball, given how much they do carry the ball there. Another injury to mention, Irv Smith. Fortunately, this one doesn't seem like it's a season ender, but certainly will have an impact on the Vikings offense. He was expected to be obviously a main pass catcher in that offense, behind Justin Jefferson, behind Adam Thielen, and that could certainly hurt Kirk Cousins and that offense to start the year.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna, we don't even know exactly the extent of this injury because,
Right.
as our injury analyst PFF Mario tweeted this morning, there are two different types of meniscus surgeries. There's the trim, which is basically he'll be back for the first quarter of the season later on. But if it's a full repair, it could potentially be a season-ending injury, which obviously would be terrible there for Minnesota because, first of all, Irv Smith is somebody who they were ready to have a breakout year with him. They moved on from Kyle Rudolph after so many years to give him the show there, and he really is their third option for a receiver there after Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. There's really nobody there. It's a very thin receiving group after those two guys. So losing him, if it's just for the start of the year, it hurts. But if it's going to be a season under that, it's going to be obviously brutal. A couple of names here to watch. Of course, we have rosters cutting here to 80 to 53 here by Tuesday at 4 o'clock. But we all know Zach Ertz in Philadelphia. That's a name that we've been watching all off season long. We know Minnesota and Philadelphia have done business before with Sam Bradford. So it might be a little bit expensive, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. And then a couple of other names, David Njoku is somebody who is on the final year of his contract. There's a couple of good tight ends there in Cleveland, as we mentioned last week. So if Minnesota is going to look to trade for somebody, there are some options available, and we know how much they value tight ends in that offense. We're going to be watching that situation very closely as well to see how long Irv Smith is going to be out for.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Irv Smith is essentially their third option now. Former second-round pick steps up once they cut Kyle Rudolph, but they also have injuries to Tyler Conklin, their second tight end, who they do like and is a productive player at times. Never going to be a feature on offense, but a solid player. He's been out as well. And their third receiver, their recent addition, D.D. Westbrook, still coming back from that ACL injury. I think he just practiced for the first time this offseason a couple days ago, so still not up to speed. If anything, it puts even more, on Dalvin Cook's plate, and he's going to get even more targets, and he's obviously going, top 3 in a lot of fantasy drafts. So if anything, it adds to his workload. But yeah, that Irv Smith injury is a big deal because they are really thin at those pass catcher positions. And I think especially as well down in the red zone, that was where Kyle Rudolph was, making his money. He was not doing much between the 20s, but once you got down there, a lot of jump balls, a lot of just bully ball, and it was productive and useful in the end zone. And I think they need that out of Irv Smith.
One thing that relates to this conversation of injuries is that this week on Tuesday is the cut down from 80 players down to 53. So we're talking about running backs, we're talking about tight ends. Some of these guys could be hitting the open market really, or hitting waivers in these next couple days here. Some teams are getting out ahead of things, already releasing some players. One name that actually is worth mentioning is we're talking about tight ends. So the Buccaneers just cut Tanner Hudson, who's having a really good preseason there in Tampa Bay. They were just really full at the tight end position. So that's even a possibility for a team like the Vikings to grab someone off the waiver wire like Tanner Hudson. But yeah, this is definitely an unusual structure this year for cut downs. Usually we see all of this coming on Saturday, and that's usually, a day or two after that final preseason game. This year, some teams played on Thursday and on Friday. Some teams played on Saturday, Sunday. The cuts are on Tuesday. So some teams will be practicing today, practicing tomorrow, and then releasing players. So just very odd structuring by the NFL this year. I'm curious to see if this gets changed or fixed in the future. But like I said, lots of cuts coming today and tomorrow as teams whittle their roster down from 80 players down to 53. Any specific names that you guys have in mind here this week?
Oh my God. So I guess I'll get started here. First of all, let's just talk a little bit about what's coming up over here. It's a really tough time around the NFL, not just for the players, but for the agents, for GMs, for coaches, for everybody. It's over 800 players are going to be released here in the coming days, and a handful will be back on practice squads, but close to 300 or 400 won't be in the NFL anymore. And that's really, really tough. So we got to just keep that in mind as well. But besides for that, I think we're going to look around the NFL. There are a bunch of different places where there are, teams that have significant, roster depth. And we could be seeing trades happening here this week. I think Cleveland with their linebackers, Miami with their wide receivers, Kansas City with their interior offensive line. I think all that is some places to watch. It could be cuts, but we also see a lot of trades here. in the coming days with those conditional 7th-round picks or 6th-round picks getting dealt in exchange for a player, because again, there's going to be the waiver wire on Wednesday. That order is basically the same order as the NFL draft order, and if you're going to be in the back end of that, you obviously would prefer just to trade a conditional 7 so you're able to get them player instead of just hoping to potentially get him on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and we've already seen a couple examples. Shaun Wade, the cornerback in Baltimore, they essentially came out and said, we would like to have this guy on the roster, but we're frankly just too deep at the cornerback position and can't find a spot for him. And so that's going to happen across the league. There are teams that have too many guys at one spot, and other teams that are, severely lacking at those spots. And so you can make some calls around in these next, 24 hours, really, and see if you can get, like you said, even a conditional 7th, maybe a little bit better. I think the receiver market is still going to be the one to watch. I think Andy Isabella in Arizona is interesting. I think Miles Boykin in Baltimore, there's been some injuries there, so maybe he survives now, but another interesting name. I think Vernon Butler in Buffalo could be an interesting name. The Chiefs have a log jam at the offensive line. There's a couple teams that have, like you mentioned, the Buccaneers have 5 or 6 guys at a bunch of spots. Mm-hmm. I think we will see a lot of action before tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern.
Definitely. And one name actually that was mentioned in the comments here, we wouldn't usually talk about a punter, but Johnny Hekker could be out of the LA Rams. There's rumors out there that, he could be moved, maybe signed or traded or something to the Dallas Cowboys. But that's just a really interesting situation because Johnny Hekker, really thought of as one of, if not the best punter in the NFL, but Corey Bojorquez is really making a push there in Los Angeles. He's the cheaper option. I know all about both of these names, really, because Bill Belichick once called Johnny Hekker a weapon. I don't think I've ever heard a punter referred to as a weapon before during my time on the Patriots beat. And Corey Bojorquez actually started his career as an undrafted free agent with the Patriots. The Patriots really hid him during that preseason and training camp, didn't let him punt, still got picked up by the Bills. But usually you don't hear about potential punter trades, but who knows, with Corey Bojorquez pushing Johnny Hekker there in LA, that's definitely a possibility. Let's talk about Deshaun Watson before we get out of here today. Certainly still one of the biggest stories of the NFL. He's dealing with the 22 lawsuits, alleging of sexual misconduct, but it does seem like there's more of a potential at this point that he could be on the move. I will say that around the league, the name to watch is the Miami Dolphins. That's the one that people seem to think is the most likely scenario that Deshaun Watson would get traded to the Miami Dolphins. But there's a lot of different moving pieces in play there, where Tua Tagovailoa is still the quarterback of the Dolphins. Miami's got a lot of draft picks, but they might not want to deal some of those draft picks until the lawsuits get settled with Deshaun Watson. So it seemed like this weekend everything was kind of coming to a head, but now it has slowed down a little bit as well since no deal has been made at this point.
I can jump in there, Ari. I think the thing that'll be interesting there is we see conditions on picks all the time. Generally not when you're talking about in multiple first-round picks, multiple second-round picks. But, if a team is going to make a move now, I wouldn't be surprised if they have a condition like, he must play X percent of snaps. Maybe it even applies to 2022, not even 2021, but just a way where it can kind of be undone if something does go awry. I don't see how, as a front office, you can make a move otherwise. And yeah, Miami emerging as the favorite, I think, is interesting. It seems like Tua Tagovailoa has had a much better preseason. Even himself came out and admitted that he wasn't where he wanted to be last year without having, an offseason really at all. I think Carolina is interesting to watch as well. Obviously, a Clemson guy and Deshaun Watson. Sam Darnold looks like, at least in my opinion, looks like the same Sam Darnold he's always been. Hasn't really excited me during preseason. Yes, they exercised his 5th-year option, which is fully guaranteed, about $18.8 million next year, but he's not the answer. And I think that team is just desperate for an answer at quarterback.
Yeah, let's just, hit on a few things with Watson. We have to remember, the guy, first of all, he's 25 years old. He's one of the best at his position. He has 5 years left on his contract. There's really no reason for the Texans to rush this. That's the thing that I think we have to keep on saying. Like, from where my standpoint on this is that Nick Caserio is not going to trade Deshaun Watson unless he's able to get the same value he would have gotten back in February and early March before all the legal stuff happened, because there are too many variables here. You do not trade a young stud franchise quarterback for 70 or 80 cents on the 80 cents on the dollar. It just doesn't really make sense to do that. So, whenever I look at this situation, the Miami Dolphins make a lot of sense. We heard Brian Flores talk about it yesterday. He didn't deny the fact that they're interested in Deshaun Watson. I think that's pretty telling there. When asked about Tua, he kind of, didn't really know exactly how to answer the question, then said, we are confident in him. So, yeah, I think Miami makes a lot of sense. But if a team is not going to be giving up 3 first-round picks, plus more picks, plus a couple of young players, I think that is something that is not going to happen until we get resolution with the legal situation. So the Texans have a few options here. They could keep on carrying him on the 53-man roster. They could, after 4 p.m. tomorrow, put him on IR, or they could just trade him. But again, why would they trade him and not get the full maximum value that a franchise quarterback is worth? So this could still keep on going. It could end up happening in the coming days, but I have a hard time seeing it happen.
Just real quick to jump in, we're trying to rationalize a move by Nick Caserio, although this past weekend they did trade Shaq Lawson, who they traded for. They converted over $7 million of his salary into a signing bonus, meaning it stays on their salary cap. And then they traded him for a 6th-round pick to the Jets. So they have about $1.8 million in dead money this year and over $5 million in dead money next year for a guy that will end up playing 0 snaps as a Houston Texan. So, we should try to look at it from a rational perspective, but they're not really operating in that way so far. So, who really knows?
Certainly a lot of factors in play there with Deshaun Watson. I mean, there's an element of maybe you trade him now to get out ahead of anything that could be coming with the lawsuits, but obviously they do want to get as much for him as possible. One final thing, Harrison Smith, the Viking safety, signed a 4-year contract extension worth up to $64 million. That's a lot of money for a safety that's, probably on the downswing of his career, but we are actually seeing some of these safeties, especially the all-pro safeties, playing longer. Devin McCourty is one who's going to be 34 this season, who's still playing at a high level. So, Brad, I'll kind of let you lead us off on this one since it's more contract related. But what are your thoughts on the Harrison Smith extension here?
Yeah, you mentioned Devin McCourty. We saw Malcolm Jenkins in New Orleans get a decent contract as well, but this deal is massive. $64 million over 4, $16 million per year average. He slots in as the 2nd highest paid safety now. I think Jamal Adams obviously moved the safety market forward in a big way, and a dormant position market he finally jumped. I think you could legitimately argue this deal for Harrison Smith does even more for the safety position than Jamal Adams did, because that's a guy who got traded for 2 first-round picks, 26 years old, all of that. Smith now legitimizes that new market by topping Justin Simmons in Denver. Just a really, really strong deal for Smith. Like you said, entering his age 33 season will be the first season of this deal. Obviously a phenomenal player, a former Vikings 1st-round pick, will probably now retire a Viking, but, strong guarantees, over $26 million in guaranteed money. The 3-year cash flow is just under the $16 million per year average, so it's not some crazily backloaded deal. It's slightly backloaded, but the last year will be 36, so it's got to be a little bit backloaded. But I think this is a one of the more impactful and influential contracts signed this entire offseason.
Yeah, I think we could all agree. We were shocked to see the 4-year number there. I think we were expecting somewhere closer to 2 or 3 when we were talking about it privately. And, it is a massive deal, and it does have an effect bigger than Jamal Adams, because it does prove that these safeties could keep on getting large, big-time money, despite the fact that Jamal was traded for 2 first-round picks and Harrison Smith is still getting this big type of contract. So the next name really to watch is in Kansas City with Tyrann Mathieu, who's entering the final year of his contract. We really haven't heard much out of there. But he's another name who is looking for a new deal. Kansas City wants to keep him. We haven't heard much out of there. And then the other one is someone who's much younger, but of course, Jesse Bates in Cincinnati. We've talked about him previously here on the show, but those two sides have not really gotten anywhere. Cincinnati made a big mistake waiting up until now, and now it's proving to hurt them right now based off these last couple of contracts we've seen at the safety market. But if something does not get done there, he is slated to be a free agent next year and most likely headed for a franchise tag.
One other factor there with the Harrison Smith contract is just that he's much more of a pure safety than Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams, you can kind of look at as more of a defensive playmaker, box player, blitzes, rushes the passer. Harrison Smith definitely much more of a traditional safety, and he's still getting that $16 million per year. So as I said, cut down date NFL season coming right up. Lots happening, so make sure to follow all of us on Twitter. Ari at My Sports Update, Brad at PFF_Brad, me at Doug Kyed, that's Kyed, and keep it on PFF.com for all of your latest news and analysis. Make sure to use that promo code KICKOFF30 for 30% off of any PFF subscription at PFF.com.